Well, what would you know? My Mother 3 brain rot seems to not want to go away, and I guess the most productive thing I can do with that power is to make yet another video talking about the game, in particular going over more cut content and other oddities. If you've seen my Mother 3 GBA Iceberg video, I covered a lot of cut content and other tidbits about the game, so I'm thinking it'd be fun to just cover even more that piques my interest, especially since we've uncovered overlooked Mother 3 development info and unused content since then. Do not underestimate Mother 3. This game has a ton beneath the surface. It's why this entire video exists. Anyways, let's start. Firstly, let's cover some stuff about everyone's favorite cowboy dad, Flint. In battle, Flint's sprite looks like this, but on the overworld, like this. Notice anything different? In case not, it's that his face is lacking detail on his battle sprite in comparison to his overworld sprite. Pretty weird, but what's possibly weirder is that for a single sprite of Flint ducking down after selecting a move for him in battle, you can see his eyes. Yeah, not counting the N64 version, you never ever see Flint's eyes except for when he isn't wearing his hat. So this being the only instance in the entire game where you can see his eyes while he has his hat on, that's interesting. Anyways, speaking of Flint, there's something weird about a certain animation he has that bothers me a little bit. These are his sprites for when he wakes up from the jail cell. They look a little weird when you look at them closely. The way his face is drawn looks pretty unrefined. That's not the really strange part though. What's weird to me is that this is his game over animation sprites of him getting up. They're the same sprites as the ones I showed before, but they look a lot better. Now, why are there two different sets of sprites for the same animation that are both in the game? Did they just not remember to replace the old ones of him getting up with the new ones? Then why did they proceed to use these refined ones for the game over screen? It's pretty strange. Another strange Flint sprite discrepancy is with the fact he has these two sets of these knockdown sprites. You know, considering like half of Flint's sprite sheet goes unused in the game, I guess the devs really didn't do a great job cleaning up Flint's sprite sheet too much. People say Flint neglected Lucas, but the truth really is that the developers neglected Flint. Anyways, there's also these sprites from Flint's breakdown at the campfire that aren't used, where he's walking to the side with the stick, which suggests he would have walked out of his way to hit Ollie. Such a shame they didn't use these sprites. One more thing is that there's a lot of sprites of characters knocking. Only the ones of Thomas and Matt are used in the final game. The Lucas and Flint one's purposes is unknown. The Bateau one, however, despite being unused, we do know what they were intended for, that being the unused attract mode. Younger Lucas also has these unused sprites of what look like him bowing. Not sure what they could have been intended for, but they remind me of Bud and Lou's bowing sprites. Older Richie has these unused running sprites in all 8 directions. It seems so specific for her to have these, and for every one of these to go unused. Who knows what they were intended for? Speaking of weirdly specific sprites, there's these odd socked sprites of Jonelle and Brenda that aren't used. There's 2 for Jonelle, of his worker outfit and his normal one. Also, strangely, he has whites in his eyes when normally his sprites are lacking that. What is going on with these ones? To move on from the Tazmily villagers now, onto the more generic NPCs, there's these unused sprites of the guy with the I Heart t-shirt, of him panicking and maybe drowning. Not sure at all what these were meant for. There's also these unused sprites of the scientist collapsed on the ground and burnt to a crisp. More than likely these were for Chapter 7. Finally, there's this guy that looks like he was struck by lightning, who goes completely unused. I presume they were meant to be in Chapter 4, as someone who I guess disobeyed the pig masks and got hit by lightning as a result. Next, I want to talk about something most players probably don't think about too often, that being Master Eddie. So as you probably know, Master Eddie is a boss you face just before reaching Tane Tane Island in Chapter 7. Something of interest is that he has animations of him in different directions that aren't used in-game. Of more significance than that, however, is that in the unused Hinawa and the twins escaping the forest cutscene, you can see Master Eddie flying up at one point, suggesting that in the game's files, whatever this might have been in this cutscene was overridden at some point later in development by Master Eddie, indicating that Master Eddie was a later addition to Mother 3, and therefore likely not something that was carried over from Earthbound 64. And you know, that's something interesting because we can add him to the elusive group of Mother 3 characters that were only ever in the GBA version and weren't in N64. I'm sure he's having fun there with Rope Snake and the Interpreter. That word salad aside, on the topic of enemies in the game, there's also this sprite of an unused bear with some honey in its mouth and its claws. Likely an unused enemy, but we can't say for certain. Next up, I want to talk about some concept art that's been discovered more recently. On Twitter, a developer who was responsible for the event design and battle data design of Mother 3, Akiyuki Suzuki, they've shared many pieces of concept art for the game. Among his concepts were art of a room in Osohe Castle full of ghosts, a bunch of events in the castle such as ghosts popping out of a present and the portrait's eyes moving with the player. More interesting here is that it seems to suggest that the Siren Beetle was usable in the overworld, like how the wall staples are. There's art of Locria's pet rat, the bro team, the whatever, a cut enemy which was a chimera of a yellowtail fish and a radish, supposedly which didn't end up in the game because it wouldn't have fit Porky's tastes. Another unused chimera called a tube blood machine, another unused enemy called the Candle Fright, which was supposed to be a rare enemy in Osohe Castle, and one unused chimera of a snake with wings and the tail of an ox. Pretty interesting to see this concept art. It's great considering I'm still waiting on there to one day hopefully be a Mother Series art book. You know, I emailed Hobonichi about that exact thing months ago, suggesting that idea and that so many people would be interested in purchasing it, and yet we still have yet to receive it. Please, Itoi, please. Moving on from that, there's some pretty interesting unused graphics in the files to the game that don't really fit in with the rest of the game, mostly because these all have a monotone palette. To my knowledge, it might be because some of them are just straight up close to impossible to rip with the right palette, but who knows. Anyways, firstly, we got some signs for the sheriff's office, for a supposed hotel and saloon, which was probably at one point meant for the Yado Inn, and one that says general store, that I imagine is a leftover from the N64 version where Thomas's Bazaar was named Thomas's General Store. There's also this other sign that says Jungle Dome with 3 arrows. There's this jagged looking rock formation, a Buddha statue, this funny one which is a pig version of a bearskin rug, this weird text that says Monster Check, what looks like a pedestal, some incomplete graphics that look like it was digitized from concept art, some miscellaneous graphics, a cardboard box and a bed, some graphics of what I think is a pile of paper with some characters hiding inside, and also these graphics for a, quote, pork company. These ones aren't yet documented on the cutting room floor, but there's this Japanese text, these numbers, and these pig mask uniforms in storage and part of a building at a diagonal angle. On top of that, there's also this pig mask zeppelin. On the cutting room floor, it's theorized that the waste products found sometimes in-game could have been connected to this. And you know, not to get into a tangent, but I never see anyone point out how the waste products look extremely similar to that substance that the Kraken in the N64 version of the game emerges out of. My theory regarding that in EB64 is the pigmas dumped their waste in the ocean because they're arseholes and would do that sort of thing. I don't think it's literally the Kraken's shit that they're swimming in, like most people seem to theorize. Anyways, there's also this weird pigma sky design. And you know, I don't know how to describe it, but this thing makes me so indescribably angry, and I have no idea why. It's probably just the shit-eating grin and smug expression. What next I want to talk about is incredibly interesting. This was actually something I mentioned in the Mother 3 GBA iceberg video, but at the time we had yet to have discovered the actual images relating to this. In a June 2013 issue of Nintendo Dream, Shinichi Kameoka shared these very early GBA Mother 3 designs and mock-up screenshots. The first image has concept art for a Clayman, Salsa, Klaus, and Lucas. And wow, those designs for the twins sure are different. The other image has 2 mock-up screenshots of the game. The first depicts a few characters standing in front of an inn. It seems to be the twins along with Flint and Duster. The other shows a different area, with a character that looks pretty similar to Lucas's later N64 design, Kumatora and another character I can't recognize. It's absolutely crazy seeing this stuff. It makes me again reiterate how great a Mother series art book would be to see, assuming they'd include cool development stuff like this, and also just, it's really difficult to know how Mother 3 would have been perceived by people if it had looked like this. Would it still have that connection to so many people that it does currently? Who knows? Next up is something I find interesting. Amongst the data loaded into the map for the Noah Islands in the intro, this is loaded into the game. It translates to tentative. I guess they just forgot to remove it from the files once the map had been finalized. There's this unused menu called Memo, which contains a bunch of text about various things from the game. It's completely inaccessible on the Japanese version of the game, but the fan translation added a feature where you can hold L+R while selecting status, and it'll bring up the memo screen. A lot of these memos are worded in a way that suggests this was cut during an earlier point in development, before a lot of features and mechanics were finalized, or even straight up removed. Some of the notable ones include this one about money, which mentions that acorns were once currency, like in the N64 version. This one about the unused coupon exchange feature, which has also unused graphics left over in the files. One that mentions magical dolls, which I speculate to be an early version of the razor and lipstick item. A healer who, again, has unused sprites relating to this description, and this one about dashing that suggests that it originally took longer for everyone in your party to prepare to dash. Pretty interesting feature, and it does suck it when unused in the final game. On the topic of unused text, there's this pretty funny unused present text I want to highlight, as well as this text that confirms that originally the hot spring in the Sunshine Forest was going to be something you had to pay to use post-time skip. Okay, I know I've mentioned this one on the GBA Mother 3 Iceberg before, but there's even more evidence that Boney replacing Flint in Chapter 6 was a thing. And not only that, but was a pretty hasty change too. Apparently Boney's name tag shows up as Flint in the game's files, and Boney also has duplicates of the sprites he uses in Chapter 6. It's weird, and I'm not sure what was going on originally, but yeah, I'm pretty convinced Flint was going to be in Chapter 6, especially with those jumping and looking up sprites. A random thing I was going to mention in the GBA Mother 3 Iceberg video, by the way, was that Mr. Saturn in the Japanese version has this green text dot, which isn't present in the fan translation at all. Why'd they not keep it? I don't know. Another random thing is that a couple of characters have text that isn't accessible. Specifically, I'm referring to some mirror text you'd never get to see normally in-game. Kumatora says, "not bad," while Boney says this, which is probably one of the funniest lines in the entire game. Also, older Klaus's talking sprites feature him with an orange tongue for some reason, and because of that, it sort of looks like he has a goatee, and you know, I think that's very important, and I needed to point that out to all of you. I guess I'm obligated to mention at least one thing regarding Earthbound 64 in this video. I want to share that in an interview with Itoi with Famimaga from 1997, he revealed that the main protagonist would be at least 15 years old in the game. Longtime viewers may remember my 10-year timeskip theory, where I speculated based on a bunch of evidence that Lucas would be 17 by the end of the game, and this quote, "at least 15" point, certainly is another piece of evidence pointing towards that. Okay, speaking of story-related content too, that was changed, I need to point this out. So as a lot of you know by now, Flint was supposed to be in your party in Chapter 4 and 5 originally before development circumstances ended up causing him to not be included. But have you ever noticed that Chapter 4 weirdly feels too difficult? Like, maybe for a Mother 3 insane lore god like myself, I don't struggle with it, but whenever I see people play through the game for the first time, the one spot I see players have a tough time with is in the attic section in Chapter 4, in particular with the Jealous Base boss fight. The enemies in this area can deal a ton of damage and can be annoying, but they're mostly manageable from what I can tell. But, like, I know this point is essentially just speculation, but you can't deny the sheer volume of people who have difficulty with this boss. It's almost as if you were meant to have 3 party members here instead of only 2, and they didn't do a great job rebalancing things after cutting one of those characters. To add to this point isn't as strong, but the boss fight I see people struggle with almost as much as the Jealous Base is the Pork Tank from the end of Chapter 3. In line with Flint being cut from Chapter 4 onwards, you may know that Wes was originally a fully playable party member rather than only a guest one. Having him be an actual party member here would probably help make this fight not be as much trouble as some people seem to have with this, but oh well. Maybe I'm actually just crazy for thinking they didn't rebalance stuff like this when they changed things around in the game, but who really knows? Another thing I want to mention is that in an interview from 2006, Itoi revealed that the design for the Claymen in the final game wasn't everything he'd hoped for, and that the very best design for them would have turned out differently. Just some interesting food for thought regarding Itoi's perception on how some specific things in the final game turned out. Oh, and for all those carnivorous Bronson fans in the audience, here's some trivia for you today. So in the credits to the game, Bronson can be seen walking next to this chicken. It's kinda out of place since you never see Bronson really with any animals in the game, but it's amusing regardless. However, it's possible that Bronson originally had some sort of stronger connection with animals, seeing as this Mother 3 Times article for the N64 version depicts him on a farm with several animals, including a couple of chickens. I know this is possibly the most inane observation possible regarding this game, but it's interesting to think if there was something deeper originally with these two things. One thing I've learned regarding Mother 3 cut content is that it never seems you can overthink or overestimate most aspects. My final thing for this video I want to mention is that in Chapter 1, there's this inaccessible text of Boney addressing Flint as Dad. Yeah, possibly one of the cutest lines of dialogue goes unused, of course. And, Mother 3 seems to have a lot of stuff I can say about it. I appreciate that there's people out there willing to listen to me ramble about this game for so long and keep coming back for more. It really makes my fixation on this game just feel a little bit more justified. Anyways, I went on for a while, so I don't know. I should probably end this video soon before it gets way too long. I'll be making another Mother 3 video at some point soon. Oh, and if you want to support me making more videos, I have a Ko-fi you can donate to. Any support is immensely appreciated. Link is in the video description. Okay, thank you, bye.